I guess the broadcast is live. Ooh, I'm glad I got my stretches in before we got started. And the crazy thing, Rod, I can't see anybody else, so I don't know who's out there. All right.
Get his mother heads pop in or no? Nope.
Well, we'll get it rolling. So, welcome everyone. My name's William Teasley. I'm with Console Brewing, and I'm also on social media at BTB William, which is the brother that brews. I was a part of an organization, not even an organization, a group of guys who got together to start homebrewing about around a decade ago. And we've been at it for quite a while. And we wanted to take some time today to introduce some folks who haven't had a chance to sort of hear about homebrewing and learn more about it and how to get into it and what it could possibly lead to. We're here today to sort of share our journey, as well as answer some questions and also talk about ways in which it can go forward. So, hey, Jill, how you doing?
Hey, Jill.
She's getting in. Okay.
What's up, boys?
What's up?
Life in all of its glory. It was a ripe, cold. What temperature was it this morning in Atlanta, Rod? It was around what, 50
like
something?
Oh, over in my house it was like 45 or so.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm up here in Seattle, and it's like we're tapping on 70. But it just goes to show, from my perspective, that Hotlanta does not mean weather; it's the people.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. But Joe, we were just getting started. I was kind of leading off and introducing myself, my background, letting people know I've been homebrewing. I still homebrew. I actually have one here. I got to remember the camera angles. My crafted for action glass. It was supposed to be a blonde-ish type lager, but I used dark grain, so it made it a little amberish.
Yeah.
So it's an amber ale now with a little mango and some other stuff in there. I kind of was saying I've been at this about a decade. The crazy thing about homebrewing is you can catch the bug, and that and if you catch the bug well, you're going to keep homebrewing. If you catch the bug really, really well, you may end up brewing somewhere, or maybe even starting your own homebrew business, or not, getting into the brewing game, the podcast game, the influencer game, and stuff like that. Yeah. Because it is fun once you kind of get in it and sort of understand how it works. It's pretty fun. So I'm going to shift over to Rod, because he was here first. Rod, don't you share about yourself?
Okay.
Your
how's
journey.
everyone doing? My name is Rod Wall. I'm owner of Off the Wall Brewing. It is a brainchild of myself and my wife. Been homebrewing for about 6 years now. Did my first batch, I want to say, I think it might have been 2016. So here we get to talk about that whole thing and how I got started with that. Because literally everything that I had fit into a cardboard box about that big. That's how I got everything started. Now I'm still in the process of building out. I too am drinking on a homebrew that I have. It's a blackberry ginger wheat that I brewed back in November with blackberries that we picked right here in DeKalb County. But I'm really excited just to share my experience with those out there listening, tuning in, and also hear about just bounce ideas with the two of you, because I just like talking beer.
Who doesn't? I like it.
All right. And Jill?
Well, hi, I'm Jill Marilli, and I always like to joke that I'm a volunteeraholic. But I started homebrewing, and I was like, oh, how more involved can I get into this? And so I volunteered to do work with the American Homebrewers Association because I'm also a joiner. It's like I love to join stuff, so I joined the club. But I got started homebrewing actually. I always try to find kinder ways to tell the story, but so if someone has a suggestion, I'll take it. But I started dating a guy that homebrewed, and I really liked his homebrew. And after a little while, I realized that was probably the only thing I liked. Bless his heart. I mean, not in a southern way, but okay. I know I was harsh, right? But it's like he's a really good guy, and I introduced him to his next girlfriend. So I got the beer. I got the beer though. I learned how to homebrew that way, and some other friend. I just happened to tell a couple other girlfriends about it. They're like, I don't know why I haven't been drinking more beer throughout my life. I mean, I enjoy all sorts of beverages, alcohol, non-alcohol, and they said, oh well, some guys that we know belong to this club, and so then I went right into the slippery slope of craft beer, and it was great. So I was able to join the club and then learn some more tips. And when I found out about the AHA, that I joined them and was able to watch a lot of videos that helped my skills. So that was about 10 years ago. And I figured out the other day about 220 batches of brew that varied either 5 or 10 gallons. And I'm kind of like you guys. It's like I started with the really simple equipment, and that's the cool part about homebrewing is you can start with simple equipment. But once I started to learn to brew, then it also just made me a huge craft beer aficionado. And I joke, I swear, I think homebrewers are the best customers of breweries because they really understand how it's made and they appreciate the craft component of it. And then finally, for me, just because obviously I'm super shy, it was the community component of it. I'm sarcastic too. It was the community component of it. It's like I could find like-minded people, and the thing I loved is it felt like an equalizer too, because I meet so many people I might not have met otherwise.
Yeah.
And people. I'm a civil engineer, so I work a lot with construction folks. I work a lot with engineers, but I certainly don't work with like nurses, or I don't work with one of my buddies is a welder. And it's like I don't know that his paths and mine ever would have crossed, but thanks to beer, it did. And thanks to beer, now I get to meet you guys too.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So what's and I'll bounce this back to you. What's one of your favorite brews to brew, either style or beer?
So that's a good one. And I was going to share, it's like, I really wish I had a beer, but I'm up here in the West Coast time zone. And right after this, I got to go back to work meetings. So forgive me. They tend to frown on, having beer during the day. So I will later on at 5 o'clock, I will toast all of you two, and then everybody on this session, and I will be toasting you with a blonde ale. Okay. And so what I like to brew usually leans towards simplicity, especially in the beginning. In the early days of brewing, I like to brew stuff that kind of was robust. Like first thing I ever brewed was a brown ale, and part of it was I really felt like you couldn't screw it up. Because you have temperature control. I mean, sanitation's everything. It's like, it doesn't matter what you brew. Sanitation will screw up everything. But sometimes the temperature control can really throw some flavors into some unique situations. I didn't intend for that brown ale to become a sour beer, but it did, that type.
Oh, yeah.
So the brown ales were great. And then as my skills grew and I was willing to invest in a little bit more temperature control, then I went more into lagers. And so if I go out, I really tend towards like German type beers, lagered beers. But when I brew, I like to keep it simple. And so anything in the kind of blonde ale or the browns, different ends of the color spectrum, but ease of brewing is definitely there. And then, sorry, I'm up in the Pacific Northwest. So if I don't have an IPA on tap at home, I don't get many friends.
Got it. Excellent. Cool. Rod, how about you?
Oddly enough, I'm not married to any particular style when it comes to me brewing, because you've seen the type of things that I bring around. I have one event I'll pull up with the sour, another event I'll pull up with the cider, or I might have a sessionable IPA. So I'm really all over the spectrum. I haven't been able to brew any lagers yet, so just because of the lack of temperature control. So I've done pseudo lagers. So just the thought of jumping into lagers excites me just to see what I can play with. But I think just as far as what I've done so far, the seasonal amber ales, just because you get to throw spices and different kind of really seasonal fruits into those and really bring out some good aroma characters in those beers.
Awesome, awesome. And Jill, by the way, Rod and I know each other, and we don't live too far apart.
Well, hopefully you're generous with your beers and kind with your words when you're judging each other's beers.
We are. Oh, we are.
Always.
And for me, when I first got into the game, and I want to share a picture here a little bit later, I did one of my first was a red ale with jalapeno peppers.
Ooh, dude.
And you know, a lot of people who are listening to this who may be new getting into it don't, you know, part of, you know, we talked about temperature control on the fermentation side. We talked about, you know, sort of the temp of the beer as you're mashing in, or even as you boil. We also know when to place things into the beer in order to bring out a better essence of it. I didn't know that then, so we just dumped a whole bunch of jalapeno peppers in it. So for us, it had a more vegetal taste. You guys have you guys go in that direction where it was like it tastes like a green pepper with no heat, because our wise self said take out the seeds. So it just was like a red ale green pepper. However, with everyone's palates being diverse, there were some people who really liked it. And so another great thing about this is you get to see how beer bounces off of different people, and our palates are like us. They're all different. And you know, for one group, something's not as positive. That's kind of like, you know, the sour game for their palate. Others are like, I can't believe beer tastes like this. But as of styles, my business partner Kevin and I, when we started, we were in Belgians. We were doing everything with Belgians and French saisons. We went all in, and we kind of got away from that for a little bit. And I recently did a triple. Kevin did a Belgian Golden Strong that we didn't call that when we made it. It was supposed to be something else. But Jill, you understand. We kind of go. Someone else tasted it and said, "You know, that's a Belgian Golden Strong," and we go, "Well, that's what it is."
Perfect.
You know, and with this being a homebrewing for beginners too, it's like, I know that when we go to breweries, it's like we taste all these exotic things, and then you go and you read the recipe. It's like, I'm going to make that at home, and it's like, you know what? Jump in the deep end. I like that you guys started with some of those. Those might have scared me off. I don't know, but I always encourage folks, if you want to test the waters, it's like, just keep it simple. You don't need a lot of equipment. It's not trivial amount, but it's also, there's a lot of ways of doing it on the inexpensive, and you can make a lot of great beer that way. And then they'll leave the fancy ones for when you're exhausted from your brew day and you go down to one of y'all's breweries and have a beverage. It's just like, keep it simple but make it fun. So if all you ever love to drink is saisons, then let's get you connected with some folks that can give you good advice. So I just love that. I just want people to, if they want to get into it, they can enjoy it. I mean, where else, like you said at the beginning, it's like, try the beer and you could take it in 50 directions. It's like, what other career or path can you go on where it starts out with something that isn't a whole lot of risk? It's a hobby, and then you can test it out. So,
cool. Well, the great thing about that leads us into part of the discussion with some of the areas we wanted to cover in our talk, and I've basically set it up to where people can ask questions as we go through. I haven't seen anyone hit us with anything just yet. Come
on, ask us a question. Those two are going to get drunk. Sorry, nobody gave me any constraints on what I could or couldn't say.
Well, but I'm sure we're going to get some coming through eventually. So one of the things, I think we're going to start off with sort of the basics, which Jill, you kind of touched on a little bit, but one of those basic things is equipment.
Yeah.
So I'll bounce it over to Rod to sort of share what equipment did he start with?
Cool story. So I figured this was going to be a question, so I actually brought it in.
Right.
No way.
Literally, this is what I started with.
So let's talk about 3 gallon.
This is all I had. This is really all I had. Because when my wife bought the kit, it literally had just it came with the grains in it. And it came with grains, hops, yeast, all of that. But I had to, of course, supply a pot, and it had the carboy in it too. So my wife looked. She actually did research before she gave it to me. Was like, oh, they said you need a bag like this, and this little measure thing, and this other thing. I was like, okay, if you say I need it, I need it. So I ended up with the hydrometer. And then my mom said, you can take this pot. Cool, got it. Like, well, it looks like it's gonna fit everything I need, and really my first kit was an all grain boil in the bag type setup. So I really just jumped off the deep end, because I don't think I went to extract until maybe like my 10th batch or something. I just kept going back to all grains, like, well, I got to find out what this means now. But really it was just a pot and a couple of small kitchen utensils just to go from grains, water, hops and such to something I can drink in glass.
Okay.
And I see we actually have our first Facebook question.
Yeah, I'll slide into that after Jill shares, what she started with, and sort of that first foray into it.
Well, you might hear us talk about extract and all grain, and those are two different places to start at. And all grain, everyone tells me that's the harder one to start with, but I'm like you. I started all grain, and all I started with was a pot. It was a little bit bigger than yours, but not much. And a cooler to steep the grains in. And so I figured it out the other day in preparation for this, and I think I spent $93 on all my equipment. There was a bunch of stuff that I already had because I had been doing like cheese making, and so there were a few things that I thought I could still use, and so it helped cut back on it. But I always tell folks, it's like, look, a decent homebrew shop should be able to help you get set up for way less than $100, and probably under 50. And just trust that you're learning. You're not going to be perfect at the beginning. It's like, what other hobby have you started? It's like, I know when I started golf, it's still not good, but there's not many hobbies that you start out at awesome. So give yourself some grace. So so mine was just a simple cooler and a pot and then a big spoon. And everything else, then I just had to grab from my kitchen. So, but yeah, that was a good question they asked. Go for it.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to quickly share mine because there are a couple of things in there. We all started with just a pot, big spoon, things like that. Rod mentions a carboy.
Yep.
We went the bucket route. So we got a food grade. About a 7-gallon bucket. You can get them at a homebrew shop because they have extra room for when the beer ferments. And the bucket was $5-6. So you don't need to spend a lot to just get started and dip your toe into figuring out if this is something you really like to do. A lot of friends I know started with Mr. Beer. And it was quick, simple, easy to knock out. But this kind of leads into the question, which was, how much space do I need to dedicate to home brewing? You can dedicate as much as you want. But if you're starting out, I think we said start small and have fun with it. So it can be a pot that can fit under your in your cabinets. It's great to have a cooler. We typically, there are multiple brands of coolers, but the brand escapes me right now that most of us use to steep our grains in, and a bucket. and,
Yeah.
and it's a food grade bucket that you typically can find at a restaurant, warehouse type operation. I've seen people use, and maybe they shouldn't, but Home Depot or Lowe's or something like that.
You know, a great place is to go to the grocery stores in their bakeries.
Yep.
They receive everything in food grade buckets, and they always end up with tons of extras. And so one of my friends started their brewing adventure with one of those big buckets. So it used to have icing in it. So.
Yep.
That's actually what I did too. Through my job, I went to the cafeteria and I was like, y'all have any buckets? He's like, yeah, we got them. And he gave me like 4 or 5 buckets. The only thing was, though, is that the buckles were used for pickles. So it smelled like pickles for like the first 2 weeks, cleaned them really good, let them sit and do some sun bleaching. I finally got the pickle smell out and started using it for beer.
That's brilliant. That's just freaking brilliant.
But sort of to also jump into the question is that as you continue to homebrew, there's sort of this desire to raise your game. Yeah. So we then, if you start off with sort of doing a 3-gallon batch brew, you graduate to 5-gallon batches. And then you may decide that you want to build a brew station. A lot of people do that on their own, typically in the garage or a basement. So they have dedicated space to work when your equipment gets that big. So if you start small, it should be able to fit in how you sort of function in your daily life. It should interrupt anything. Outside of if you're fermenting your beer, it needs to be in a cool space. So that could be a closet. it could be, basement. As you get more advanced, you can do there's other things you can do, but just getting started, maybe, having a cool space where you can store it. So the yeast can eat the sugar and become, ferment and become beer is a good, sort of a good start, as well as being able to put towels around it and stuff like that, because as it ferments, other things can happen.
Can happen.
Exactly. But we call those happy mistakes. With my business partner, Kev, his wife moved him out of the house after a couple of mistakes. So he has his own space in his backyard. So if you're starting small, you can keep it with it. It still works within the space you have. But I think outside of the putting it in a closet where it has good air flow and it can stay cool is probably about the biggest demand you have, because you're going to clean everything after you're done and put it away. So.
Yeah, and for me, the biggest footprint, I'll just jump in because I'm always thinking about it from the, for my sisters of the hops and barley. Little hands can, if you're doing this and you're trying to do it around little people too, it's like trying to keep that out there, because the first thing they like to do is take the top off. You're protecting your fermentation and pull it off, and it's just like, okay, is this contaminated or not? And when they drop the Lego inside, you're just like, So really, I just don't want anybody to put it off. I think the biggest footprint is having a place that you can keep your fermentation vessel, your bucket or your carboy, somewhere where it can stay undisturbed and in a cool place. And it doesn't have to be, you don't need like the footprint for a fridge or anything like that. So if there was a footprint that lasts longer than your brew day, that's all it really is. Yeah. And keep it simple.
Got it. Yes. Jill, you sort of touched on it a little bit about the budget. So, as you said, when you started, it was less than $100.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 10 years ago.
So it might be 115 now, or after COVID, we don't know. We might be out of stuff. But Rod, what did your wife share with you her first budget for your kit? Just getting started.
I did some researching after the fact, and I think the kit maybe been like $35, $40, maybe for a 1 gallon batch.
Yeah.
And then I want to say maybe like 2 years later, when I fully understood I had the full bug, because I had done a couple more batches. I was like, well, I need another fermenter. And at the time, still speaking about footprints in space, I was like, well, I need something else. So I bought 2 more 1 gallon carboys. And then I was in Target one day and they had the Mr. Beer set up for, I think it was, the Target was like closing. I was like, oh, this thing is $10. I'll buy it too. It's a 2.5 gallon fermenter. That's all I was thinking was fermenter. And I was like, I'll make the beer too, just in case.
Yeah.
And so it's just things that I could stack up. But like I said, that was only $10. So I came upon another fermenter. So at that point, I could have collectively maybe like 6 gallons of beer going at once through various vessels, but all small experimental batches.
Got it.
So yeah, it wasn't anything too astronomical.
Got it. A thing I'd like to share is, the first introduction. I don't know how many people fry turkeys or boil crawfish. It's the same freaking pot.
Yeah, the exact same thing.
And if you buy a kit with the burner, that might be pushing $90. Because you'll need a burner as well. Now that we talk about it, as I think about the other things that kind of go with it. So most homebrewers do use propane primarily as the heat source for heating the water for the mash, as well as heating the water during the boil and stuff like that. And we also use propane. So I had to go and get one a couple of weeks ago. So, and you can get the propane, whether it's a Home Depot or Kroger. I mean, it's one of those places when it's one of those things that's accessible during normal times. Abnormal times, people may run out of it, like, July 4th weekend. Don't try to go fill up and get your tanks down. But, and that's around $20 each go around, but you can probably get like 5 or 6 brews out of it because of how long you got to run it out of a propane tank. And the burner lasts forever. And typically, and Rod kind of highlighted, you can use those pots for other things.
Amen.
So my son wanted to do a crawfish boil for something, and we use the brew pot. So they have, there's a lot of cross functionality there, but it doesn't break the bank. Another thing is, sort of getting your raw materials for your brew. Yeah. And there's typically making, there's the grain, which is one part of it. Most of us have access to water, so we already got access to that. And then another thing you typically purchase, is your yeast. So for me, I do 5-gallon batches. My cost is anywhere from $35 to $45, depending upon what I'm brewing. And the grain has different costs to it. The yeast does as well, but it's fairly consistent. The yeast is typically $6.95 to $8.95. So if you're doing an all grain brew, like I think most of us do, each brew is going to be between $35 to $40, to $45, $49. And that just depends on how far you want to go. Jill, Rod, you guys want to add anything to that?
Jill, you can take that.
Yeah, you're so sweet. No, I mean, there's a huge range of things. It's like, I try to, not knowing everybody that's listening in, it's like I want to orient it towards the beginner. It's that, you're probably buying your yeast fresh each time. You're buying your malt, all that good stuff. There are ways to continue to help drive the costs down. If you're doing it because you just love beer and you'd like to be able to drink a little less expensive beer, there's lots of ways to do that. You can regenerate your yeast, you can recover it, and there's just things to learn about that component. So for all of them, but if I do a 5-gallon brew, I'm into it for probably about $35 to $40 usually. And a lot of this depends on the style too, because different malts are going to be more expensive and all that good stuff. So I think if you just know that if you do a 5-gallon brew, and it's somewhat proportional, you're about, say, $50. So, $10 a gallon, that's pretty good, right?
Well, typically I share with people is you get about 2 cases out of a 5-gallon brew.
Good rule of thumb. Perfect.
So you end up about $1 a beer. So that's better than anything you can get going to a store.
I'll drink to that.
Off the shelf, and if and it could be a lot better, and it's better for you. I like the aspect of you get close to your ingredients, you know what's in it. You have that ability to sort of, if someone tries it, you can go through your what you did and how you made it how you made it come to fruition, for lack of a better term. But yeah, so I wanted to share that cost because that is a cost, and it's a recurring cost. Also, folks, please understand that when you brew a beer and you put it in a fermenter, it takes at least 7 days for it to be ready. So there's another cost there of what you do with it after the 7 days. So you can bottle it, and there's cost for that. Or the more, I'm going to leave the beginners at bottling because everyone should start there and then graduate to the cornies and adding your own CO2. There was a question out there when you get into making your own recipes, what's the shelf life for the ingredients once they're opened? Jill, you want to take that one?
I was going to say, let Rod answer that one.
Okay. So just starting out. So I'm still at the point in my journey where I'm still ramping up my system. So I still do very small experimental batches. So like right now I have a 3.5-gallon cider going. But I can do anywhere up to 5 gallons. But once I get my three burner system set up, we're talking about 15. But for the small batches, when I was starting out, I was only buying those ingredients as I needed them. It wasn't to stockpile or anything like that. So I'm buying them fresh. I know when I go to the homebrew store, depending on which ones I go to, some of them let you crush your own grains. Some of them they'll crush them for you. You just give them the recipe. But your grains are getting crushed fresh there, and then you go home. I think the longest I took to brew after getting them crushed may have been like 3 weeks, but he even said month and a half would have been fine. I'm at the point now where I have grain storage at my house because I have my own grain mill now. So those and I have those in airtight buckets, and I think the shelf life on those may be upwards to 6 months to a year. And I'm gonna start brewing more frequently, but yeah, 6 months to a year on those grains. And my hops, I have some hops that have been in my freezer for maybe about 2-3 years. So, but they're all pellet hops, and you see how much I use those. So I always forget about them.
I think you're proving that it's kind of like how you treat your product too. It's like when you get it home, milled grain versus unmilled. If you're doing all grain, you want to use them a little bit closer to fresh. It's just like cooking, don't you think? It's like the longer the mayonnaise has been in the fridge, we'll see, right? But it's still good. It just might change the results a little bit more. But I was laughing because your hops in the freezer. It's like, yeah, I got you on that one.
They're there.
And they're still fine. So, just don't.
You're home brewing.
Yeah. So it's like anything. Heat and light will degrade things faster, including us.
I have a dedicated homebrew freezer. So it has, when I buy grain, because sometimes I'll grab it during the week and won't brew until the weekend.
Yeah.
So I drop, the grain is there. Also, hops, other adjuncts and stuff I also use as a part of the process because I buy another thing, we were talking about sort of the price of the raw materials is hops. So, as you get into home brewing, you'll be at the homebrew shop or you'll be online, and they typically do 1 ounce bags at around $2-3 if I remember correctly. And so you buy as many as you need for whatever beer you're trying to make.
Yeah.
And the homebrew places will have recipes. You can find recipes online at Brewer's Friend, Beersmith. A couple of those guys will always have recipes. Zimmergy.
Brew Association website.
And, There are plenty of homebrew recipes out there. And and when you start, it's good to kind of follow those. Trust me, I'm one of those who throws jalapeno peppers in there when I probably should have it.
Without the seeds. Yeah, we heard
without the seeds, but wanted the heat. But hops do degrade over time, so it's one of those things of if you have a great climate, where no air can get to it, no sun, pellet hops last a long time. You can also go online and buy bulk. I buy by the pound, so I can do like Hops Direct, and they get discounted hops. And because I like to use pellet and the boil whole leaf at the end and in secondary. That's just my thing. But there's always ways to drive down the cost. And if you get the pound's less than $1 an ounce if you do it that way as you get in. But also, if you decide to sort of work with some other people, you can share. And that kind of leads to the question about homebrew clubs. And I think Joe can start, and then Rod can talk about our kind of experiences with the ones we have here in Atlanta.
Well, I'm going to speak more to the personal side, just because, there's this idea that it's all a bunch of bearded guys that are the ones that are brewing. So we got one out of two here. I think that I didn't even think much about joining a club because friends were already in the club, right? And yes, they happen to be guys, but clubs are one place to find like-minded people. And there may or may not be a club near you. And it's just like any other group. It's like you just grab a bunch of your friends who like brewing, call yourself a club. But so American Homebrewers Association has a loosely organized structure for that, and helps nurture the clubs through some of the benefits that they get. But just joining the online component of American Homebrewers Association, which fortunately everybody that attended your hands-on demo, and for those that are watching today, they can send in an email to Craft for Action, and we can hook you up with a short-term membership so you can check it out. But it's an information exchange. I'm a real, thanks Lana Beer Boutique for posting that. Clubs can just give you that sense of, okay, I'm not totally messing this up, or I have a tendency to overthink it. And so I bring in, it's like I was doing a brew and I couldn't get the temperature quite right, and it's like, so I did do this once. I threw out a whole brew, and they said, no, this is how you would have solved it. And so then I never made that mistake again. The other thing is I also made the mistake of not calling them that day. So it just gives you a whole new set of friends. And like I hit on earlier, it's like I love my friendship world is so much broader because of beer and joining the club on that. So my whole thing about American Homebrewers Association, of the almost 40,000 members, the people that have joined, way less than half are in a club. Thank you. Way less than half are in a club. And I joined because of my club, but I found that the values are really broad, especially with the internet. And if you get onto a reputable site, then you're going to get good advice. It's like, I think there's over 1 million people on the Reddit thread. Yeah. But some of the stuff that I see on the thread is like, whoa, dude, don't do that. I know. So just some thoughts.
Got it. Rod.
Yeah, I think clubs are phenomenal, honestly. They actually helped me become a better brewer. I started out in Norcross with, I guess I'll drop the name, PC Masters was the name of the homebrew club. And I happened to live out there, and I found out about them stopping off in the homebrew shop. Some guy just approached me and was like, hey, I've never seen you here before. And we just popped up a conversation. He's like, hey, well, we have these meetings at this growler shop. Come by. Okay, perfect. And they had meetings, and it was a monthly beer that we did, and we bring it in, we taste them, and just talk shop. Talk about setups, and it helped me like expand my mind about what I was doing in this new scene that I was in. Now, when I moved to another part of the city, I was like, well, I'm clubless again, but I know how to brew better beer now, so I can do it better by myself, doggone it. But since then, since then I've found access to another club, gotten associated with a crazy craft beer community here in Atlanta. And I am a member of the Homebrew Association as well. And the magazines that come through help guide me to, things that I might want to change up in my processes and help guide me through. So that's definitely very good foundational help for beginner brewers, just in clubs, because it helps you get your comfort and get your feet up under you as you jump into to home brewing.
Yeah, awesome. And we mentioned sort of the Homebrewers Association. They got some great resources on there. Zimmergate is a magazine that can come digitally as well as touch it. I have copies out there in my hallway that I refer to regularly because it helps you learn more about this craft that you're now in. I've been around several of the homebrew clubs here in Atlanta, and Covert Hops is one. I've met those guys years ago, and I pop in from time to time. New London Brewing Club. I've been all the way out in Lawrenceville, and there's some great guys over there. And then Final Gravity, which is another group that functions here in Atlanta, primarily Atlanta City area, in town, more or less, have been ones that I've met some really good people. I go and I learn a ton. I do what Rob does, and then I go home and then I do it on my own, just to sort of build my knowledge and expertise. And you mentioned social media. I'm on the homebrew groups and Facebook, and there's always someone there asking a question. If I have an answer, I put, I join in and throw it into into the comment stream. And so they're a great resource, a knowledge resource, as well as a good way to meet people. And beer is one of those mediums that all people from kind of all walks of life can really, when you meet a beer guy in a homebrew shop or a beer lady, we talk beer. Whatever's happening in the world over there is happening in the world over there. We might leave there and go back into those spaces.
Yeah.
But it isn't, beer's the common sort of denominator there. I think there was a question about, have there been clubs, one is like a ladies only club that you are familiar with, Jill. I know there's a couple of clubs that have been started by groups who you don't traditionally see in a lot of clubs. SoCal Cerveceros is one, which is a large Latino homebrew club. Yeah. And things like that. So, Jill, I'd like your thoughts around those types of things happening and forming, and how AHA kind of looks at them and supporting them.
Yeah, it's part of why I just was so excited to meet Jen Price and what she was creating with Crafted for Action, because it just there's just so much depth to all of this. Just a point though on beer and talking about beer, I jokingly called it's the best social lubricant out there. So. I told you I want a T-shirt that says that. There are. Good. I'm still coming down and drinking beer with you guys. There are a few out there that are really organized around that. I think that what you find a lot when women organize a women only, it's like they're open to whoever wants to come in. And so I know one in our area that started out as a smaller group, just to really encourage folks to do hands-on brewing, and then it grew into a well-mixed club. On the professional side, of course, there's the Pink Boots Society, and that is definitely the women's organization for women in craft beer and brewing. It's not as oriented towards the home brewer, but they're definitely always happy to tuck you under their arm and bring you along, because so many women do get into professional brewing, and they go through it through the same way that any man or any other person would get into brewing, and that's through the home brewing. In fact, I can't believe I didn't already know this, but you guys have heard of Orval and what good beer that is over in Belgium, and their head brewer, and mind you, this is a monastery beer. Their head brewer is a woman. It's so cool. She was the assistant brewer for years and years and a kabillion years. And so when their head brewer retired, then she stepped in because they have lay people in the brewery. So I just thought that was kind of cool. And
Wow.
she's been doing this for 30 years. So to the question, there are women-only groups. What I found is more probable is that you find a club. I'd be shocked if there was a club out there that wasn't, well, I shouldn't say I'd be shocked, but so many clubs really want that diversity of men and women. And you might find maybe you're the first one there, but once there's a couple in there, they tend to break off. So in my club, we do have, we'll have a couple of, we call it Chicks Brew Day, and get folks together at someone's house. And either we're just brewing one brew, or you can bring your system over. It's similar to AHA's Big Brew Day. We'll just do a Chick Brew Day. It's kind of fun, usually in the winter. So I saw the question. It's like, do homebrew clubs need to register with the AHA, and what are the benefits of being part of AHA? That's really sweet to ask. They don't have to, right? But if you register with the AHA, there's a lot of benefits. When you gather as a group, there's a whole bunch of liability in our society that comes with it. And so by registering as a club, you can get access to insurance that you otherwise as a group couldn't afford. And we always really recommend that. And then there's also specific information that does come the club's way. We try to get it out onto the broader website, but that we really do target homebrew clubs. And the governing committee of the American Society, I'm sorry, the American Homebrew Association, brain hiccup, has an entire subcommittee that orients towards how can we help clubs. And during COVID, just as an example, when everybody got sent home by themselves, we provided club speakers to help them along to keep the life of their club going. And so we were all on a lot of Zoom chats and different platforms, sharing expertise, and we were pulling in professional brewers to help the clubs. So I think that as we start to emerge from this, it's like everybody's coming out stronger because of that.
Got it. One thing I wanted to sort of jump back out there with, though, was also around, as you know, one of the challenges in craft beer we've seen, especially in brewers, has been a lack of diversity as it relates to brewery owners, brewers, and things like that. How's the AHA kind of approached those types of subjects? Because Rod and I have known each other for years, as I mentioned way early when we started this. But you know, we have been typically the African American in the room. Or there might be another one that we brought. And so, you know, it's kind of like that default that things sort of end up, you know, well, this is just kind of how it formed. How's the AHA kind of approached, you know, sort of that, you know, bringing more diverse people to the table?
Yeah. So the American Homebrewers Association is its own association, but financially it's housed with the Brewers Association, which is the professional side of things. And long before this became a much more mainstream conversation, that the Brewers Association and AHA were pulling in those that had been able to, if you will, break through, and so that we could keep building on that. And so through their renamed DEI efforts, of course, we had been putting a lot more focus on what could be done to assist more diverse breweries opening from the professional side. And then on the club side, then finding ways where, you know, like people find like people, there's a lot of synergy with that. And then help bring that up into the more regular conversation. But most importantly, I think the most recent thing is that we hired Dr. J, and she is on the staff now she can help guide the professional staff of the BA and the AHA to keep digging deeper so that we can find the simplest of tools to help bring everybody along at the same pace. I think it's something so simple as about 3 years ago, the AHA really started paying attention to the pictures that they were using, the pictures that they were taking at the National Homebrew Conference, and then what they were using in their media approach. Because if I had judged AHA on that, it's like, I never saw any women in those pictures, right? And much less anybody of color. And so they've been a lot more sensitive. What is it that they're doing so incorrectly on that one? And the reality is that there's so many clubs out there of color. And you one of my points I'd written down to make sure to talk about is SoCal Cerveceros, and I never say that right, but they are so cool, and they really are such a dynamic opportunity to share with the Latino community that beer comes in all shades, right? Yep. And so do we. And so it's just letting folks know that making beer is a really simple thing, and anybody can do it. And it doesn't have any we get it down in the economic levels, we can get it down. It's just it's a simple brewing process, and it has such high level of connection. So what they're doing, I think that they continue to develop a lot of different programs. What I think is going to be most helpful in the future is helping. There's a financial impact for getting breweries started up. So connecting people with money is going to help a lot, because there's just so many creative brewers out there, and getting started is probably the toughest part.
Got it. Rod, anything you want to add?
No, I can't follow it up. That's actually great. You summed it all up. I'm not stepping on that one.
Well, and Rod and I, we were talking because Big American Brew Day was a week ago, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, first Saturday in May. First day of voting, first day of drinking.
And there's having been a part and very familiar with what's going on with like Covert Hops, New London, Final Gravity, they meet at someone's house. Sometimes they do a big, it's a big brew day. So they'll make a barrel and split the wort.
Oh, yeah.
It's things like that. And Rod and I were just talking about, I know at least 24 brewers of color sort of in my sphere, and we've talked about it. We've just never done it. And so I will commit to the next, with Rod's assistance, doing something for May 2022.
Hold my feet to the fire. Let's do it.
And we're going to do a big brew day. I'm going to rope in some folks we know, but I'm going to talk to them first.
Hey, I'll throw down with you though, because there's another one. We have Big Brew Day, and it's the idea is get tons of people brewing at the same time, right?
Yeah.
And then the next one in November, I got to get my dates right. November, there's Learn to Homebrew Day. And the idea is grab somebody who's always said, dude, I love your beer. And it's like, well, then that's the day you say, come on over and brew with me. Now, I highly recommend inviting someone that you can already stand and can stand for 5 hours.
Yeah.
Because, some people you invite over and after 3 hours, it's like, could you go? Just go. But when people see how easy it is, the thing I get fearful about is that I scare people away because I have, equipment. And my other half, he was a brewer before we met. And so when we combined when we combined our brew equipment, I knew we were in a commitment. But now we have this big system, and it looks so complicated. And I keep telling people, no, I swear to you, it's simple.
Well,
and Jen will get you up here to Seattle and get you up here for a big homebrew day.
and Rod and I are going to lead something.
I'm with you. I'm here for it.
I think we really should do a Learn to Homebrew Day. Well, we're also part of a group here called Leaders of the Brew School. And these are primarily breweries and planning. So we have been home brewing. So now we're looking at what's next for us. So, we're kind of looking at a co-op model. So we can, that's potentially a space we may get into. I don't want to speak too far ahead of some of the folks that are a part of it. We're working that out. But I also know that we just need to advertise and say we're going to have a day where people can come out and learn how to make beer.
And with your co-op model, it's a really fun way too, because a lot of people realize after brewing once that they just like sitting at a bar and ordering a beer, but they'll be happy to contribute. But and just in the world of connection, it's like I know of at least one good co-op brewery up here. So if you ever want to talk to anybody about it, let me know and we'll connect you. So
got it. And I think Thomas had a question. Which Atlanta clubs would you all say are more heavily involved? And I'm a designer with roots in marketing that's looking to get connected. One of the easiest groups that I've walked into has been Covert Hops that primarily operate in the city of Atlanta. There are other groups that also operate in the cities outside of Atlanta, like Marietta, Kennesaw, I mentioned New London. There's the one near yeah. So there's several. If you go to the American Homebrewers Association page, you'll get to see if there's one close to you or near you. Also, for me, Covert Hops meets at a brewery once a month. Typically, one of the brewers there has been a member. And by default, technically, we're all kind of members. So it's you don't really pay dues or anything like that. Or maybe I should. I don't know. But they have monthly meetings. Go to you can search them on Facebook, and that's where you'll find Covert Hops. You'll also and Final Gravity, which typically meets over at the Wrecking Bar over here in Little Five Points. And that would be a great way to sort of just go and experience it, which is how most people do that first time, because you don't know these people, number one, and you're just trying to figure out this homebrew thing, and you heard about it and it sounds interesting. Then maybe go to another one and then just try it. You can buy a Mr. Beer kit online. You can go to a homebrew spot. If you do this, you need to find a local homebrew supply shop. Because without it, it's a lot more difficult. Or without one, it's a lot more difficult. And so that's something that's helpful as well. I know there are, 5, as I think about them, that I go to in Metro Atlanta. Schoolhouse Brewing, which is a brewery that also has homebrew supplies. And they're all about teaching, is a great space. And there are a couple of others, Wine Workshop and Brew. Rod, you go to?
I go to Gravity Craft out in Conyers, and then Brew Depot in Alpharetta.
Yeah.
When I'm up on that end of the world.
Yeah.
So yeah, those are the main two.
So another thing, just for everybody, sometimes you got to plan your brews around where your brew shop may be located. And the great thing about COVID is now you can do your recipes. You can call them in by phone. You can call them, or you can email them, or even some will do online ordering. So you'll know what they have when they get there. And a lot of times, especially as it relates to grain, is they'll have it packed and ready for you. And you can go grab your yeast, grab your hops, and grab a beer in most places and pay for, and just pay for it and can go home. It's they do a lot of it for you. Jen just asked a question about dues. So if you join the America Homebrew Association. There are annual dues, correct? And if so, how much are they?
They're free if you send her your email for, I think we're giving away a 1-year membership, but that's $39. You can also, $39 a year, you can also pay monthly. So it's a lot easier that way. I just want to poke it in. You guys are talking about the homebrew shops. I consider them the lifeblood. I mean, they are there to help. You don't open a homebrew shop and not want to talk to people. So they're there to talk and they'll get you started. For now, if you came to this session to just kind of get a flavor about homebrewing, one thing to do is go to YouTube, and American Homebrewers Association has a channel. There's not a ton of videos there. There's a lot behind the paywall, if you will. But there's a really great 12-minute video. I think it's about 12 minutes long. That just gives you the steps and gets you an understanding that basically all you're doing is making tea. You know, if you have a little tea bag, you make tea, and then maybe you throw in little hops to add it, get it a little zip, and then some yeast, and then put it away for a bit. That's really all you're doing. So watch the video, go to a homebrew shop, and then the homebrew shops will help guide you to clubs in the area. They're a good source. And on the AHA website, you can do a little search on Atlanta or your suburb. So.
Got it. And I think you mentioned earlier, not all homebrew clubs are on, are registered at the American Homebrew Association. Right. A lot of them are founded around homebrew shops.
Yes.
So some of the ones I know a couple that aren't, official Homebrew Association members. But
doesn't matter.
That homebrew advice is it's just really good. They love talking grains, hops, yeast.
Hey, our motto. Don't forget the motto, guys. Come on, it's relax. Don't worry. Have a homebrew.
Have a homebrew.
Exactly. So I think we're at the time now, and oddly enough, Jennifer hadn't said anything to me about wrapping it up, but I think we should.
Yeah.
Jill, thank you very much for jumping on all the way from the great state of Washington.
That's where most of your hops come from, so come on down.
Yeah.
Definitely. That's where I've been ordering South African hops lately. So, and hops can come from a lot of places. So, as you get into this, you kind of see us all smiling here because we have this weird geek thing as it relates to when you make beer. You start talking with other people who make beer. You just get
a rabbit hole.
We have a life.
But we want to thank everyone for those who joined us. This will also be available later on the Atlanta Beer Boutique YouTube channel. Thanks everyone. Thanks Rod. Thanks, Jill, for joining us today. I finally finished the beer I started with Crafted for Action.
Thank you for keeping us organized. Hey, thank you for hosting this and keeping us organized. And I look forward to sharing a beer with all you guys.
Hey,
can't wait.
We can fly again, so that's gonna happen sooner than later. All right, y'all. Take care and have a great evening. And thank you for joining, and everybody out there who spent some time with us today.